the radical, fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, welcome everybody to a new episode of the Yaron Brook Show. I'm here on a very brief day and a half at home in Puerto Rico before I head back out again on another trip. I will actually be flying to London tomorrow. So some of you, those of you in the UK, can see me at the London School of Economics. We're doing a panel discussion / debate with one of the scholars from the Institute of Economic Affairs, the LSC, the London School of Economics. That'll be Monday evening. You can find information about that event on my website, yaronbrookshow.com. Then on Wednesday, I'll be doing a panel / debate with Douglas Murray in Rotterdam in the Netherlands. The Netherlands that has just recently experienced what appears to be a terrorist attack. A Muslim killing, an Islamist killing 3 people on a train in the Netherlands. So hopefully that event goes peacefully. But that'll be in Rotterdam, run by I think the Rotterdam Students for Liberty at the university there. And that also information on that you can find both on my Facebook page. There are Facebook events, and you can also find it on my website. The following week, on the 1st of April, I'll be back in London to do an event for the Adam Smith Institute about inequality at their offices. So hopefully I'll see some of you either at the LSE event or at the event at the Adam Smith Institute. And following that, I'll be in Israel for an event in Jerusalem at the Hebrew University, and then a series of events as part of the Freedom Forum, conference that is run in Jaffa, in close to Tel Aviv Jaffa, at the port there. That should be a really amazing event. And then I wrap up that particular tour on Saturday with a talk at the Students for Liberty regional, European conference in Belgrade, Serbia. So I hope to see some of you Europeans on this tour. I know I enjoyed seeing many of you on my tour through the United States a couple of weeks ago. So, thanks for coming. All right, today we're going to do, I've got, there's a bunch of stuff in the news, and I haven't done kind of a news briefing in a long time. I'll start with that. I think the main thing I want to talk about this time, we talked about the New Zealand shooting last time. So if you missed that, you can find the show on that. It was about 5 days ago, that streamed, so you can catch up on that. I did want to talk about the college admission scandal today. I think it's fascinating and interesting and reflective of what is going on in the world today. Quick super chat question: was your event in Berkeley recorded? Yes, it was. It was recorded, and they send me the initial video that was live streamed, but the sound is terrible on that. They did do a professional recording of it, so I'm waiting to get the video of the professional recording of the Berkeley event, and that'll go up. The other video that I'm particularly anticipating and excited for is there's a video of a 2.5-hour debate that I did at Lafayette College on socialism versus capitalism, and I thought there was a lot of good content there. There was a lot of good questions. And you can see what a real socialist professor looks like, and it was all around a good event. It was packed house, was standing room only, and that video, which is 2.5 hours long, that'll be available at some point. I'm waiting for Lafayette College to make it available to us. So all these events, as many events as I can, where the quality of the taping is good enough. Not everything, unfortunately, is taped, but everywhere it is taped, we will have it. We will have it there. All right. I did want to mention. Yes, I'm going to go through a number of these news stories. North Korea, ISIS, Afghanistan. There's a bunch of them. Brexit, delay in Brexit, stock market, the economy. bitter war claiming the capitalism and racist. We can talk about all of those, but of course, I'm also going to accept your questions on Super Chats. I want to be sensitive to what interests you guys and what you guys who are willing to put a few bucks behind your questions are interested in asking. So anything you want to ask on news, on any other issues you want, or if you want to do any follow-ups on the discussion of the New Zealand shooter, I am open to all of that. Use the Super Chat feature on YouTube to ask questions. Let me just comment quickly. I'm not going to say much about this. I haven't said much about this since we began, really, since Trump became president. And that is the Mueller investigation, as you probably have read or seen on television. Mueller has finally submitted his reports about Russian collusion and other investigations with regard to the Trump administration, including obstruction of justice or anything else that was rumored to be part of that investigation. We don't know what's in the report. I don't know what's in the reports. The Justice Department was supposed to send some highlights, some summary of the reports out to Congress today, but they're postponing that. They'll probably do that tomorrow. Certainly by Monday, we'll know a lot more about the reports. I have not talked a lot about this because the fact is we don't know much about it. The people who have, most of the people who have been indicted from the Trump administration around the Mueller investigation have been indicted over things that are unrelated to the initial reason for the investigation, which was the supposedly collusion around with Russian intelligence around the elections in 2016. I never quite believed that, although I wouldn't at all have been surprised if the Trump administration had asked, or some people within the Trump campaign had asked the Russians for some dirt on Hillary. But, collusion and it all seemed a little exaggerated to me. But on the other hand, we did find out that a lot of the people surrounding Trump's, are crooks. And that doesn't surprise me either. My guess is that if you'd investigated most campaigns, you would find that they are surrounded by crooks. I think most people who are involved in the administration of politics and administration of campaigns are not exactly the most ethical, the best people in the world. Manafort, the more I read about him, the more I was disgusted by him. But of course, that had nothing to do with the Trump administration necessarily. It had everything to do with the way Washington functions today and the way politics is today. The cronyism that we live under today. The fact that it is so crony out there in the world, and that people call America capitalist, which is a sad joke. So it never surprised me. Manafort was part of the lobbying machine in Washington since the Reagan administration. Was probably corrupt back there. He took it to a new level. He was particularly efficient, particularly good at schmoozing and buying influence. And then, of course, the very fact that he spent a big part of his time career in Ukraine, one of the most corrupt countries certainly in Europe, in maybe in the world, I don't know, but certainly in Europe, and working for a relatively pro-Russian president. That tells you everything you need to know about Paul Manafort, and certainly, I'm sure, about how corrupt he probably was. And then, of course, the questions are, of course, about whether Trump should have hired a person like that and so on. But my opinion of Trump is so low, my opinion of him as president is so low, that none of these things matter that much. None of these things surprise me. Because the real evil that is Trump is not hidden. It's not in a conspiracy. It's not about who he's hiring in the background. It's his actual policies, his actual behavior, the actual things that he says, the actual things that are well out in the open. I don't need an investigation by the Justice Department to figure out who Trump really is. And yeah, I know, the Trumpsters are out, so good for you. So I think, we'll see if anything interesting comes of this report when it's actually released, or when portions of it are released next week. But again, it's not in any dramatic way, I think, going to change my assessment of the Trump administration, because most of his evil, most of the bad stuff he's done is quite visible and quite awful. All right. Suman asks a question. He says, new to objectivism, been following you a lot lately. Just wanted to say thank you. Oh, okay, great. Thank you. Thanks for the support. I really appreciate it. The other stuff surrounding just surrounding this, the prosecutions, people lied. Again, not surprising. People surrounding politicians lie. That's a shock. And then the indictment of a lot of Russians around attempts to do illegal stuff in the United States around the elections. Again, not surprising. Something that was quite visible and evident that was happening. So we'll see if this whole Manafort investigation was worth it based on the report, or whether it was just a waste of our tax money. Do you think it's noble to give to others in need? In your personal life, are you at all are all altruistic motivations immoral? Okay, so this is kind of a question that comes up all the time. You have to separate out in your mind what altruism means, or what are altruistic motivations, from the idea of helping others. All right? So altruism does not mean helping other people. Altruism does not mean being kind or nice, or opening the door for old ladies, or even giving to charity. Altruism is a philosophical perspective. It's a philosophical view of morality. It's a philosophical view of ethics. It's not certain behaviors. Those could be charitable. They could be. There are lots of words. Compassion. There are lots of words that could describe those kind of behaviors. But altruistic motivation is motivation by an ethic of altruism. So altruism is a particular philosophical view of morality. And no, I am never altruistic in that sense, and it is absolutely immoral. Well, I wouldn't say it would be immoral. Altruism is immoral. You are going to engage in altruistic behaviors because they're so coded into you, because you grew up with them. They're so part of who we are that it takes years to get rid of them. So I wouldn't say that every altruistic behavior that you engage in is immoral. Altruism, though, is an evil ideology. So what is altruism? Altruism is the idea that the purpose of your life is to serve others, that their well-being is more important than your well-being, that their success, that money in their pocket is better than money in your pocket, and your purpose in life is to serve them. It's to benefit them. Not because you're going to get pleasure out of it. Not because you think the world will be better if you do it. Not because you think, and you live in the world and therefore that's a good thing for you. If even a semblance of egoistic reasoning enters into you, the reason that you help other people, it is immoral, according to altruism. So altruism is a vicious, evil ideology that tells you your life does not matter, that other people matter and you don't, that you are nothing but a slave to the needs of others, and indeed that their need is a moral obligation on you, that the very existence of need out there in the world enslaves you to that need, requires you, whether voluntarily or through coercion, to provide those people in need. So it's a moral obligation. It is a moral duty, and I don't do anything out of a sense of duty. I don't do anything out of in morality out of a sense of I've got a duty to do this, and I don't do anything out of a sense of altruism, out of a sense that the well-being of somebody else is more important than mine. Now that doesn't mean I don't help people in need, but I only do it when I think they are deserving of my help. That is, that for the most part, what's happened to them is no fault of their own, or that they have redeemed themselves and they can put themselves back on their feet and they can be successful again. So the fact that they are needy is not the reason I help them. There has to be some connection to my life. There has to be something that makes it valuable for me. For me. Right? And so it's hard because we are taught that you must, and emotionally, particularly, when we first read Objectivism, we're very conditioned to feel like we have to help somebody because they're in need. Not for the whole altruistic reason that our life doesn't matter. That's implicit. That's never actually stated. Although, if you take a philosophy class, or even if you listen to your mother carefully, then it's stated explicitly more often than we would like to believe. So, altruism, helping other people out of a sense of duty. Altruism, helping other people out of a sense that their life is more important than yours. Altruism, helping other people out of a sense that your happiness, your life does not matter, is wrong. Helping other people out of compassion because something happened to them that is not their own fault. Helping people who are trying to bootstrap their life and make their life better. Helping people because in some rational way, it helps you and it makes you feel good, but rationally, because there's a rational connection to your life and your values. All of that is fine. All of that is good. It's not super noble. It's not that important. But it's not, it can be good. And indeed, there are people in your life that you should help, that have provided you with values that you respect, that maybe they fall on in bad times, but you maybe even love. And therefore, you should help them. It's your moral responsibility to help them, not because it's an unchosen duty, but because you love them, but because you care about them, because something bad has happened to them, not of their own fault, and their success will benefit your life. Their flourishing, once you help them, will do your life good. So, nothing against helping other people. Objectivism says nothing against helping other people when and if it's consistent with your values. It is only, again, the altruistic helping other people that is wrong. And it's wrong for both reasons. One, because you're supposed to help blindly. And second, because once you adopt this mentality, it diminishes the value of your own life and the way you see your own life. And most people hold this. Most people hold that they do have a duty to help other people, and they feel guilty when they don't. Most people hold that they do have a duty to help other people, and they're fine with the government stepping in and taxing them in order to make it possible because they know they don't do it, so-called, enough. So altruism plays out in many, many ways around, and here's another way. Vines writes, how can I stop caring what other people think about me? Altruism has really taught us that, because altruism teaches us that other people are what's important. Altruism ultimately is otherism, translated into otherism. It's the placing of others above yourself. And in the most important way, it is the placing of their judgment above your own judgment, which means that includes their judgment of you. So if they are more important than you, if your job in life is to sacrifice to them and serve them, then they are what counts morally, but they're also what counts ultimately epistemologically and metaphysically. And therefore what they think of you becomes everything, becomes super important. And indeed, you thinking of yourself, you evaluating yourself, you judging yourself, you estimating yourself is very self-interested. It's selfish. And we're taught not to do that. Certainly you don't want to have pride, right? Because pride is a sin. It's about judging yourself and judging yourself to be good and then making an effort to be even better. Pride is all about the activity of making yourself the most moral person you can be. It's about striving for perfection. Oh my God, that is so selfish of you. That is so self-interested of you. That is so, focused on you when you should be focused on the other. So how do you stop caring about what other people think about me? Well, it's hard. Because again, we've been conditioned for so many years, since we were so little, so young. And what you need to do is think. You have to think every time you find yourself caring. Ask yourself, why? Why should I care? Who the hell are they? What do I think about myself given where we are right now, the particular situation, and you've got to internalize that process of asking yourself, why should I care? What do I think of myself? Orient everything towards what do I? Is there valid reason why I think I care about what they think of me? I mean, he's my boss, and whether I get a raise or not, right? Or is it just this altruistic need for affirmation? And I want to talk more about this because it relates to the college admission issue quite closely. This whole idea of caring what other people think of you, this whole second-handed mentality, which is really the theme of Fountainhead. So if you care about what other people think of you and you've never read The Fountainhead, then that is the number one book you should read. And if you have read The Fountainhead, then think about what kind of life you want to live. Do you want to be a Howard Rourke who doesn't care what other people think of him? At least not what most people think of him. He cares about what good people think of him, but he's not going to change his behavior. He cares because he's interacting with them. He's got a relationship with them, but he's not evaluating himself based on what they think of him. Or do you want to be a Keating? And Keating, of course, lives for the approval of others. And I think Ayn Rand does a fantastic job showing us the existential and psychological consequences. The consequences in happiness. The real consequences in career success. So Keating thought the novel is the most successful based on society's definition of success, based on having a job and money and doing a lot of projects and other people's esteem. He's the most successful architect. But he's unhappy, he's miserable, he's a nothing, he's a nobody, and he knows it. Howard Rourke is a failure from the perspective of other people's opinion and his professional success based on conventional measures. And yet he is happy, confident, striving, and ultimately the winner, the guy who gets the best jobs and gets the girl and gets all his values achieved, because he is primarily a first-handed thinker and he cares about himself, what he thinks of himself. And he's willing to give up the conventional trappings of what is good and bad, what is right and what is wrong, what is success and what is failure, in order to live by his own judgment and only by his own judgment. All right. Let me just look at these questions. Okay, so we got a bunch of questions. I'll try to get to all of them. But let me say something about the college admission, and it fits into this. I mean, the college admission scandal is pretty amazing, shocking, but not surprising, really. It's the depth and the extent of it and the sophistication of the fraud I thought was a little surprising. But the fact that people are doing this is not. And I have to say that this relates to something I observed when I first came to the United States. And when I had kids, it became even more and more and more evident. And that is the obsession that Americans have. The obsession that Americans have with higher education, with prestige in higher education, with where are my kids going to go to college? I mean, There are parents out there who are planning this from birth. What kindergarten will get my kid into the best primary school? Will get my kid into the best high school? Which will get my kid into the best college? Best defined as what? As ranked the highest, as prestigious as the school I went to, as what other people say is the best. With all these parents that I've encountered over many, many years, I've never heard once of the question of where will my child get the best education? Where will my child learn to use his mind most effectively? Where will my child get the most knowledge? Where will my child flourish? What university best fits the interests of my child? No. They have to go to Harvard or Princeton or Yale. Why? Because it's prestige. Prestige for whom? Well, often it's for the parents. Often it's so the parent in the cocktail party can say, well, my kid's at Yale. My kid's at Oxford, right? Whatever, right? It's this second-handed mentality that we just talked about applied to universities and colleges, and it's obsessive. And it's all, I think, mostly driven by second-handedness, by wanting to appear important, wanting to appear successful, caring about what other people think of you, and elevating that to a primary. And therefore, driving your kids nuts, or, which I think is more prevalent and in some senses more disastrous, turning your kids into conventional little bromides of the kind of kids who go to Harvard, the kind of kids, completely conventional in their ideas, completely conventional in their behavior, completely conventional in their activities, just completely conventional. All so they can go to the esteemed college so that other people can look at them and say, whoa, you went to Harvard. So they'll get a job not based on their skills. They'll get a job not based on their success. They'll get a job not based on what they know or how hard they work or how much they apply their mind. They'll get a job based on a resume. And unfortunately, there are many jobs given away based on resume. I don't think long-term you succeed very much, other than in politics and maybe a couple of other professions, based on what school you went to, your connections. But as Ayn Rand illustrates in The Fountainhead, you can go a very, very long way, even in corporate America, even in law firms and investment banks, and certainly in architectural firms and others, by being a second-handed, not uncreative, conventional player of the game everybody else is playing. And it's sometimes the individualist, the one who's a little different, the one who's a little bit quirky, the one who's a little bit brilliant, gets penalized for that. And you have to find the right firm, you have to find the right environment. I think in Silicon Valley is a lot more tolerant of that, and a lot more open to that, to the real genius, and less focused on resumes. But I was sitting, actually that's interesting, I was sitting with a couple of very successful businessmen the other day at a very successful company in the financial industry. And we were sitting around chatting. And one of them said, we were talking about education, and one of them said, I don't know, for years we've been talking about just having a test and just hiring people without even looking at where they went to school, and without even requiring them to have gone to school. He says most of our hires today are from Ivy League schools, and most of them suck. Most of them are terrible. And we know we can do better. We know we can put in a regime where we did the testing. We didn't just rely on the reputation of the school, but we actually relied on an objective test, on some kind of interaction to determine who are the best, and we could do much better in hiring. And I said to him, so why don't you? And he basically said, we're too lazy. We're too lazy to do it. It's just easy to look at a resume. Oh, Harvard, Princeton. Yeah, they went to MIT. Great, let's just hire them. There's a book by Brian Kaplan about higher education where he says one of the real values of the top schools is not in their superior education. Indeed, Leonard Peikoff has argued for years, and I think there's some truth to this, certainly in the humanities and the social sciences, that the better the school, the worse education you get. It's not a correlation. It doesn't mean in bad schools you get a good education. It just means that you guarantee to get a really, really bad education if you go to the really, really good schools. They tend to be the most PC schools. They tend to have the worst of the professors. It's not about the education. It's not about the quality. It's about the signaling. If you could get into Harvard, and if you could pass Harvard, you must be smart. You must be a hard worker. Therefore, we're going to hire you. And even if it turns out it's not a great signal, a lot of those Harvard grads are no good, it's still easier, I guess, for many businesses just to use it as a signal. So I've always found this phenomenon disturbing and upsetting and disgusting in many ways and sad. And the fact that parents treat their kids in a way that makes them so conventional. It turns them into, into these bromides is sad. And the scandal, of course, is an illustration of what happens to those kind of parents when suddenly it turns out that their kid is not working hard enough, not getting good enough grades, not doing the things with all the parents' help and all the tutoring and all the best schools and everything. The kid is still not fitting into the box. He's still not what the parent wants him to be. Maybe they're not smart enough, but my guess is it's not about smarts. It's about the kid is just not fitting into what the parents' expectations are, the parent demands, and of course what these top schools expect. I mean, I could have never gotten into any of those top schools. I mean, I didn't take high school seriously enough to get grades good enough to get into any of those top schools, and neither did I want to or did I care. I grew up in a different world, different time, in a different continent, different country, where these things were not that important. But hey, 12th grade, I spent a lot of time at the beach instead of classes. It was a lot more fun. I learned probably more stuff at the beach than I would have in class. I did okay, but I didn't do great. It wasn't that important to me at the time, and it hasn't turned out to be a great detriment to my success in life. So it's not surprising then that when parents are so ambitious for their second-handed kids that they are willing to bribe, to cheat, to literally hire people to fake test results, to change their kids' answers on tests so they score higher grades. I mean, it's just unbelievable. To pretend that their kid can play tennis and bribe the coach to get him into or her into the school on an athletic scholarship. I mean, it's truly stunning what these parents were willing to do, to get their kids. I mean, you should read some of the articles about this. It's quite amazing. And not surprising, it's this kind of completely second-handed, what other people think of me, what other people think of my kid, and my kid then will be successful because other people will think good of them. And it's all about what other people think, because what other people think, Harvard is good, therefore it's good. And it's nothing, zero, zilch. Not a single parent said, I wanted my kid to have the best education possible. They don't know. They've never researched. How many of these parents actually research the quality of the schools they send their kids to? How many of these parents research the quality of the programs at the universities they send their kids to? And how many of these parents would know what good quality is and what it isn't? By what standard would they even measure it? So this is pure second-handedness. Second-handedness meaning care what other people think. Using other people's judgments instead of your own. Taken to the nth degree, that's what the college scandal is. And it's really sad. And it's sad that parents like this exist. And many of these parents are incredibly successful. And it just proves that you can be successful. You can be a Peter Keating and be successful, make a lot of money, rise very high in certain organizations. You can be, some of them are even compartmentalized, where they might be even first-handed. They might be even actually good at what they do in one realm of life, and complete second-handedness in a different realm of life. Human psychology is amazing in terms of its ability to compartmentalize and have us functioning at different levels and different attitudes with different values in different parts of our lives. It's truly stunning. But all of that, by the way, is, hurts you, right? So you can't be happy. You can't be completely successful at living if that's the kind of life you're living, if that's the kind of compartmentalization going on. Of course, think of what this does to the kids themselves. Some of them, of course, knew that this was happening, so they already corrupt themselves. Why didn't they fight it? Why didn't they say, no, I don't want to go to Harvard if I can't get into Harvard? Why didn't they stand up for themselves? No, they bought into this already. But some of the kids didn't know, because their parents were doing it behind their backs. They were even getting their test scores bumped up. And the kids, now, my guess is they must have known to some extent that they didn't score that well on the ACT or the SATs or whatever. Certainly the ones who couldn't play tennis and who got a tennis scholarship knew. But think about those who didn't know and now suddenly have discovered that they got into these prestigious schools not on their own merit, but because their parents lied and cheated. I mean, their self-esteem, think about what it does to their self-esteem, their ability to have pride, their ability to respect themselves. It destroys them. And now, of course, it's out. So to the extent that they're second-handers and who care what other people think of them, well, other people think really badly of them now. And this is why it's so important to be first-handed. Well, I mean, there are lots of reasons why it's so important, but it's so important to make decisions based on your own rationality, your own thinking, and your own values, to go to the school that you think is best for you, and to earn your success, because that contributes to your self-esteem and it justifies, your pride. And pride is that working towards moral perfection, is that working to be better, to be more moral, to be more first-handed. You can't be proud if you're cheating, stealing. You can't be proud if what you care about is what other people think of you. These people are hopeless. They're never going to be happy, never going to be successful, unless they completely rethink their values. And these kids, I won't say their lives have been destroyed, because there's a way of coming back from their lives being destroyed. But it's pretty horrific for them. And then, of course, there are the kids who didn't get into Harvard and Yale and Princeton, who might have worked hard and might have deserved getting into those schools and might have had a good reason to go to those schools, and who didn't get in because somebody cheated to get in. Now, for the most part, I don't think that matters that much. I mean, if those kids were really, truly ambitious and really, truly valued that, they probably went to another good school and probably did fine. But it's still true. Somebody got kicked, didn't get in because somebody else got in. And to the extent that top schools are bad for you, then maybe some people not getting in, maybe we did them a favor. Maybe the cheaters did them a favor by not allowing them in. I doubt that's the case. All right, I'm happy to take questions on college admission scandal. If you have any comments or anything like that, feel free to use the super chat for that. All right, we've got a bunch of questions in the super chat. Let me try to go through them quickly. In the quote, democracy of the market, do good rational ideas really win out in the long run? Isn't this contingent on convincing the masses of consumers? Yeah, it is contingent on convincing the masses of consumers, but that is relatively easy to do when you're appealing to their self-interest and the competition is between two products, one that just works better and one that works less. So, and not everything is about the masses, so we'll get to that. Not everything is about the masses, because often the masses follow the early adopters, for example, and sometimes it's convincing the smart early adapters or the smart reviewers or the smart people who actually lead the masses. Maybe it's convincing the right people at Amazon or the right people at Best Buy or the right people at CNET or whatever the review magazine is, that your product is better than everybody else. So for the most part, good rational products win out over others. And even when you find something like Beta was better than VHS, for those of you who vaguely remember what that was, better by what dimension? Right? Better by what dimension? When you actually look at a full analysis, the ease of use, the number of early adopters, VHS was just easier to adopt for people, and therefore it was better. It was more consistent with their values. So part of it is, what do you mean by good? Good ideas. Good for whom? Good for whom? A value for whom? And Ayn Rand talks about this in Capitalism, Not Known Ideal, in the lead essay, What is Capitalism? One of her deepest, most interesting, and hardest essays, I find. And she has a number of concepts there that deal with these kind of issues of do, and answers at the end of the day, yes, if you define good ideas right, if you define what you mean by good ideas, good for the people using them. Now, does that mean that in all realms the marketplace does that? And the answer there is no, certainly not in things that are more spiritual and less material in nature, and this is part of the fountainhead. It's quite possible in the world we live in today, where there is no market and where the culture has embraced second-handedness, that the hard works of the world are not successful, that good architecture is not identified, because the Ellsworth Tuohys, and everybody who hasn't read The Fountainhead should, are very powerful and have a following because we live in a mixed economy, not just a mixed economy in the material realm, but also in the spiritual realm. And that is true also in the mixed economy of the material realm. Because the government manipulates the market, it's not always clear that the best product for people is going to win. So in laissez-faire capitalism, in a society worthy of laissez-faire capitalism, in a society that is worthy and therefore has embraced laissez-faire capitalism, the only society in which laissez-faire capitalism will exist over any kind of time period is a society worthy of laissez-faire capitalism. Yes, I believe that good, rational ideas really do win out, because for the most part, we wouldn't have laissez-faire capitalism if people were not rational. And people are rational in a majority of their economic decisions, much more rational than in their ideological decisions or their spiritual decisions or anything that requires abstraction. People are most rational when it comes to money, when it comes to goods and services that they purchase. And because the market penalizes failure and rewards success, for example, if you waste your money, you won't have any, so you won't be there to influence the market. The market is not one person, one vote, so it's not democracy in that sense, right? It's not one person, one vote. Your vote can be taken away from you if you've made bad decisions in the past, because you will have no money. So it's the people with the money who ultimately make the decisions, and they don't make them decisions equally. The more rational you are, the more powerful of a vote you have over time in the marketplace. So yes, I think that the marketplace is very good and does reward the rational good ideas over the long run, to the extent that it's a true marketplace, and the more free an economy is, the more that is true. Okay, Jonathan asked, isn't risk-taking irrational because you're allowed an element of luck into your decision? No, risk is not about luck. How can risk be reconciled with rational self-interest? Everything you do is risk. I mean, risk involves uncertainty. Risk involves not knowing what the future holds. And that is true in every decision, almost every decision that you make. You know, it's rare that we are certain about the future. Now, yes, it's certain that when I let go of my iPhone, I'm holding it up in the air, it will drop because the laws of gravity dictate that. And there's certain things that we can be certain about like that. But most human decisions, or most human conclusions about the future, there is uncertainty. And risk represents the fact that that uncertainty could reflect outcomes that are negative for us, that are bad for us, that have negative consequences. And your job as a decision maker is to try to figure out, in a sense, what's the probability of a bad outcome? What are the probability of a variety of good outcomes? Does the probability of the good outcomes outweigh the probability of a bad outcome? All decisions about the future, in one way or another, are probabilistic decisions. They're not decisions that you can arrive usually at with certainty. And since they are probabilistic, they entail risk. They entail the possibility, not luck, but just the possibility. It's not an issue of luck. Luck implies a certain randomness. It's not an issue of randomness. It's an issue of recognizing the fact that there are certain negative outcomes that are possible. That's what it means to be rational. Rationality requires you in your decision-making process to take into account all possible outcomes, to weight them, and then decide on the appropriate path. And part of that is to estimate the extent to which you can tolerate risk. That is, the extent to which you can tolerate failure, the extent to which you can tolerate your plans not, some of the positive outcomes not actually occurring, but a negative outcome occurring. Is that something that will devastate you and crush you and you will now be able to overcome? Is it so much money involved that you will become destitute? There's certain risks not worth taking. But you cannot live without taking risks. Everything you do involves some element of risk. Some of it random. Lightning could hit you. Unlikely, but it could. A tsunami could wash you away when you go at the beach. Very, 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 very unlikely, therefore not even worth thinking about, but possible, random sense. So every activity involves risk. You could in the next step you take, you could really twist your ankle and cause yourself immense pain. You can control that to some extent, but maybe there's something on the pavement that you haven't noticed. You can't ignore the fact that there are obstacles in reality, that there are things that you cannot control, including, call it luck, including random events. But to the extent that you can control risk, again, is it worth controlling? Maybe the downside risk is so small that I don't want to spend the energy on controlling it because the upside of gaining the value is so huge. Take investing. Stock market went down a lot on Friday. Now, that's a risk you take, and you don't have control over that risk. Is it worth taking the risk? Well, if you invested in the stock market over the last 40 years, you've done very well in spite of it going down yesterday. Is it worth taking the risk of once in a while taking a big drop, a 2% drop in the stock market, or maybe even an extended drop of 30, 40% in the stock market? Given that over the very long run, it turns out that you make a lot of money, better than you would have made in other alternative investment. So yeah, I'm willing to take that risk of once in a while it going down because overall I'm better off. So almost all decision making is done under uncertainty. Almost all decision making has to take into account a variety of different possible outcomes, and therefore all decision making has to involve an element of risk and an element of probabilistic thinking about the future. Do you ever speak of things Ayn Rand got wrong, such as her being in favor of intellectual property, which is a monopoly granted by government? Well, I mean, I do sometimes speak of things that I think Ayn Rand got wrong when I think of that, but that's really unusual and rare because I don't think she got much wrong. And in this case, you're just wrong. That is, Ayn Rand was not wrong about intellectual property. She's absolutely right. Intellectual property is property. It's no more granting you a monopoly than the government protecting in the courts your right to having a fence around your property. You could say that your home is a monopoly because nobody else can use it. It's a monopoly. The government has granted it to you, not because it hasn't granted it to you. All it's done is it protects your property right over it. Intellectual property is exactly the same. You have a patent. All the government is doing is protecting your ability to use that patent. It's not giving you a monopoly any more than it's giving you a monopoly over the house you have, or over the plot of land, or over any other physical property, your bank account. It's protecting you from other people taking that. And the same thing, the patent system is exactly the same thing. Exactly the same thing. Is objectivism compatible with Stoicism? No. Not as I understand Stoicism. You know, and again, maybe you have a particular understanding of Stoicism that is consistent, but I don't know enough about Stoicism. I don't know enough about the philosophy. But no, objectivism generally is not compatible with any other philosophy out there. It's not compatible with any other philosophy out there. I mean, I'm not Stoic. Are you Stoic? I don't, I need to know more about what you're thinking of Stoicism and what you're referring to in Stoicism that might or might not be compatible with objectivism. The art behind you house and view. I'm not sure what that means. The art behind me is posters. That is a giclée of a painting. That is just a poster. That painting, I think, is in Switzerland. It's a Vermeer, and it's called The Geographer. And it's in my house, but they are posters stuck to the wall, not originals. I do have originals in the house. I like having art. I like to be surrounded by art. Appointing 2 Supreme Court judges makes Trump tolerable. Well, not to me. I think there were lots of other Republicans who would have appointed good Supreme Court justices that were 1,000 times more tolerable than Trump and 1,000 times better than Trump. The fact that he got to make these Supreme Court appointments and not Hillary, okay, that is definitely better. But I'm worried about the next 4 Supreme Court justices, and I'm not sure who's going to make them, and I'm not sure what the legacy ultimately of Donald Trump is going to be. And there's certain issues in which I'm worried about the Supreme Court. So we will see what happens, how good these nominations are going to be. I suspect Gorsuch is better than Kavanaugh, but we'll see. I'm not a legal philosopher, and I haven't looked carefully at everything that they do. But I generally don't think that the Supreme Court is going to stop us or throw us into the abyss. And yet I do think that presidents like Trump can and ultimately will throw us into the abyss of authoritarianism, the abyss of ever-increasing, which we already have, statism. The abyss might be a left-wing government forever. It might be a right-wing statist government forever. I don't know. But, I don't think any one action makes a president tolerable. I don't think any one action makes them intolerable. I think you have to look at the totality, and I think the totality is that Donald Trump is one of the worst presidents in American history, and will go down as such, and is moving this country in a horrible, really, really bad direction. And the very idea that a human being like Donald Trump is president is a really, really bad precedent for who can and cannot be president of the United States. I think he is in kind worse than any other president, at least in the modern era. And I think we'll need some history in order to really evaluate how bad or how good or how neutral he landed up being. But everything suggests to me that he's going to be really, really, really bad. And a lot of it will depend on the 2020 campaign as well. Alex asks, were the tyrannies of ancient Greece a necessary prerequisite to the ideas of liberty and individualism, or were they wrong then too? I mean, I suspect that they were wrong then too. I'm not an expert on this issue, so you need to ask a real historian of ancient Greece, and it was somebody who understood the philosophy and the history of the various tyrannies. We also have to remember that Athens went through a period in which it was not a tyranny, and as such, I think Athens was a prerequisite to the ideas of liberty and individualism. I think in many respects Athens is. We talk about Greece, but what's really important about Greece is Athens. And both in terms of political freedom, but mainly, just philosophy, the embrace of philosophy, the embrace of ideas, the embrace of know thyself. Socrates' statement, know thyself. The embrace of Socrates and Plato and Aristotle, even though Aristotle was not from Athens, he lived there an important chunk of his time and taught there. And of course, he was a student of Plato's there. So Athens is the cradle of civilization, and it's cradle of civilization partially because it wasn't a tyranny during important parts of its existence. Now, could it have been in that moment in history that all the Athenian cities would have embraced liberty? No. So I don't think that you can say they should have all been free countries. They couldn't have been. The ideas weren't there. The intellectuals weren't there. But you can still condemn them as tyrannies, as a bad thing, as something wrong, because it is something wrong. Whenever people are not free, it's something wrong. Did the ideas exist to free those countries? Well, Athens, the ideas existed in Athens, so they could have existed in Sparta. They could have existed elsewhere in Greece, and they didn't, and that's unfortunate. Imagine if Sparta and Athens hadn't fought a war for, I forget how many decades, and if Greece had not, and particularly Athens, had not weakened itself so because of that war, and Athenian philosophy and Athenian way of life and the Athenian view of the world would have been even more influential because the Peloponnesian Wars had not been fought or whatever. Now, again, these are the kind of historical musings that you would have, that really to do, you need to be a scholar of the period, which I am not. So you should ask a scholar. What is it like living in Puerto Rico? I mean, it's like living anywhere else. It's great weather. It's a little too humid for my liking and too many mosquitoes for my liking. But other than that, the weather and the atmosphere is pretty nice. People are very friendly. The food is fantastic. Crime levels where I live in the areas that I hang around are relatively low. There is culture. Not as much as in a major city, but as much as I think in minor cities in the United States. So there is a symphony orchestra. Once in a while, you get some opera singers coming about. Every Sunday, there's a piano recital run by the Steinway Society. So there's real culture. It's pretty. I live in a great condo, so a lot of it, like everything in life, is what you make of it, rather than. I could live, there are a lot of places in the world where I could live and live well. It's what you make of your life. It's how you surround yourself with beauty and success. And of course, I think I've talked in the past about the massive tax benefits for me that exists here in Puerto Rico. Not for everybody, but for me, Puerto Rico is about the best place in the world from a tax perspective. All right, do you like Bach as a composer? I mean, I respect Bach as a composer. I don't particularly like him. I think that he lacks... I mean, I like the Bach I like the most is the Bach that's romanticized in the 19th century, that is played as if he's a romantic composer, but of course he wasn't. I find him a little cold and technical. I have a strong preference for 19th century classical music and romantic music, starting with Beethoven, Schubert, Schumann, Tchaikovsky, and Rachmaninoff. I like Wagner. I love Brahms. I even like some of Mahler. So I like the period from Beethoven on till about Rachmaninoff. There are a few the Rachmaninoff period. There are not many composers at that point that one can like, because they've been too influenced by atonal modern music. But there are plenty between Beethoven and Rachmaninoff. There are lots and lots of really, really good composers who are my favorites. I still like Mozart and Haydn and Handel and Bach. I like Mozart more than Bach, but again, because Bach is so cold. Mozart is already breaking away from that. He's so technical. Avid Film Buff asks, is Gandhi an overrated figure? Probably. I don't know enough about Gandhi, but yes. I mean, the whole Indian freedom movement was unbelievably socialist. It was unbelievably, primitive in many respects. They wanted independence, but for the sake of what? There was no conception of individual liberty, individual freedom. I like that he fought nonviolently, and he was successful nonviolently. But of course, sometimes fighting violently makes sense. The American Revolution was a violent revolution. So just the very fact that you're not violent doesn't make you a hero. So I suspect he's overrated, but I also, again, don't know enough about Indian history to make a definitive statement about it. And I'd be interested in people who might know more about Indian history, what their assessment of him is. All right, let's see. Thank you for producing valuable content for me to consume. How do you deal with criticism or disagreement of yourself and of your ideas? I mean, everybody disagrees with me. I mean, there's probably a handful of people in the entire universe who agree with me on everything. So if you can't handle criticism or disagreement, then don't be an intellectual. Certainly don't be a public intellectual. I try, for the most part, to deal with disagreement and criticism in this way. I don't really care that much, well, that's not right. Okay, let me say it differently. There's two approaches to dealing with somebody who disagrees with you, because there are only two possibilities. One is the right to criticize you, and a lot of people criticize me, and they're right. And I could learn a lot from them. I mean, at the Eichmann Institute, other intellectuals used to tell me I'm full of it frequently. And I learned a huge amount from that. Leonard Peikoff used to tell me I'm full of it frequently in the 1990s. And I learned a huge amount from that. So the only approach to people criticizing you or disagreeing with you and them being right is, thank you. Wow. What would I do without you? This is great. People who disagree and criticize me, and I think they are wrong, well, that's their problem. It's not mine. The truth is what matters. And if they are wrong, then they don't have the truth, and therefore they are worse off, and therefore it's their problem, not mine. Why is it my problem that you're wrong? It's not. I'd say there's only one exception to that, and that is that I do get frustrated. And I don't get frustrated at university campuses from people who don't get it who disagree with me, because they'd be crazy to agree with me. All I hope when I go to university campuses to talk in front of them is to spark some interest, to get them thinking, to create some cognitive dissonance, to encourage them to read a book, to go read Ayn Rand, to do something like that. So that doesn't frustrate me. What frustrates me are people who should know or pretend to know objectivism and what objectivism stands for, and then massively misrepresent it. Or people who should be able to see the truth because it's damn easy. It's not hard. And the truth is staring them in the eye. And the facts all aligned on my side. And they're smart enough and they know enough about objectivism to see it, and they don't. That frustrates the hell out of me. So you see that frustration sometimes on this podcast when I see it on the chat. Not so much among people who are just wrong, but people who are misrepresenting objectivism. People who are claiming to be objectivist but are really alt-right, for example, or racist. People who are dishonest but claim to be objectivists. Or people who are just clinging to some emotional idea and disregard all facts. All facts. So, Donald Trump's a good example. I get angry at some of the disagreement over Donald Trump. Not because I don't expect people to disagree about Donald Trump. I think evaluating a president, evaluating any president, I think is hard. Evaluating the long-term consequences of a presidency, the character of any human being, a president, the value and relative value of different policies, the relative value of the particular philosophical orientation of a president or an ideological orientation of a president, in a mixed economy, in a mixed world in which nobody's perfect, really, really, really hard. So that I expect. I expect people to disagree with me on Trump. What I don't expect is just the viciousness of those who disagree with me often on Trump and the blindness to any fact. That is the unwillingness to consider anything that might suggest that they are wrong. And doing it then in the name of objectivism or in the name of reason and rationality. That upsets me. Now, I guess I shouldn't get upset and rationally. I should get upset because it's sad that is the state of the world and that is the state of the people who follow me, right? That is the state of the people who listen to my show. Or many of them. Again, I'm not upset at people who disagree with me about Trump at all. I think this is a complex issue, and I'm not surprised at all that some of you disagree. What upsets me is the blindness. It's the emotion. It's the unwillingness to consider any fact, any evidence, any issue, and then the name calling. The name calling. Yeah, here's an example, right? An example. This guy, somebody wrote, yes, they take white people's jobs. This is just from now, I don't know what the discussion's about because I'm not following the chat. I don't know what that's about. But anybody that uses the term white people in that context, I find that so despicable. I find that so disgusting. I find that so racist. And in the world in which we live, that don't listen to my show. So it upsets me because to find so many people listening to my show, engaged in our debate, and not paying any attention, not caring about the fact that I find that, and therefore them, despicable, that just upsets me. It's not the disagreement that upsets me, the existence of so many people who hold those views, who hold that attitude. How do you introduce friends that are generally pro-reason yet middle of the road without real principles to objectivism? I still find that the best way to introduce them to objectivism is to get them to read The Fountainhead or Atlas Shrugged. It's to get them to read Ayn Rand, particularly the novels. If people don't respond, at least positively, at least if they don't find Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged challenging to their ideas, what are you going to say? It doesn't mean that they're convinced by them. Once they find them intriguing, interesting, worthy of discussion, then you can have discussions with them. You can give them the nonfiction. You can send them to me, whatever. But if they don't respond at all to those books, it's hard to imagine how they'll respond to anything else. Now, there are going to be exceptions, but I'd say that is the best and most common way to do it. Somebody's asked, how do you find Greeks today receptive to objectivism? No more, no less receptive to objectivism than non-Greeks, I think. There are quite a few Greek objectivists. I think most of them live in London, but there seem to be quite a few Greek objectivists, not as many as Israeli objectivists in terms of per capita, but there are quite a few. I think Greece is part of our culture, part of our world. Maybe it's going through hard times, so they're more receptive to it, because I think people going through hard times are often more receptive to objectivism than people whose life is easy. But nothing exceptional about Greeks today, positive or negative. All right. Let's see. Okay, any sector stocks that are worth following today? I don't give investment advice here at that level for a variety of reasons, but maybe the most important one is that I'm regulated by the SEC, and the SEC does not want me to give investment advice, but also that I don't really do that kind of investing. That is, I'm a big believer in diversification, in index funds, and I think that most individuals are pretty lousy. Pretty lousy is, I guess, a nice way of saying it. Pretty lousy at following particular stocks in particular sectors and investing in them. I think 99% of people should index and should go to sleep at night and not worry about the stock market and not think about it too much, other in the sense that they think society is heading in one direction or another and adjust therefore, something like that. Let me just see. Yaron, try living in South Africa, you idiot. What's that got to do with it? I have a lot of family who live in South Africa. As I've said before, my family is from South Africa. But you guys in South Africa tried this white identity stuff. How did that work out for you? You guys tried apartheid in South Africa. You tried your white supremacy in South Africa. How did that work out? Pretty lousy for both the whites and certainly lousy for the blacks in South Africa. The best thing you can do in South Africa is call for colorblind society. And if you think that is futile, then the best thing you can do is leave South Africa. And that's what I would do. And that's what every sane member of my family and every sane person I know has either left or is trying to leave South Africa, because the future, because of your racism, because of white racism and now black racism as a response to white racism, that racism is destroying the country. And if you don't think that you can overcome that racism by fighting for a colorblind society, then leave. Then leave. But to advocate for your white racism in a country that you created, then you deserve what you get. Right? If you're going to stay a racist, you're going to deserve black racism, because that is the response to white racism. And since blacks are majority in South Africa, they have the power, and they're going to take you out, right? Because they're racist with power, and you're racist without power, and you'll get exactly what you deserve. If you want to fight for the good, if you want to fight, then stop being a racist. It's as simple as that. You can't be a racist and fight for liberty and the good. The fact that black people did bad things to your family or any other family, that's sad. But the solution to that is not racism. All right, and here come the on the chat. I should ignore the chat. Here come the IQ people in the chat. Perfect timing. All right, everybody. Let me see if there's anything I wanted. I have to say something about North Korea. I haven't commented on since the last summit of North Korea. I've mentioned in the past my opinion about the United States going to summits with North Korea. I've mentioned in the past my opinion about chumming up and being friendly with North Korea. I find, that is an example of why Donald Trump is such a bad president. His attitude towards a homicidal maniac, a genocidal maniac, a murdering dictator of a foreign country. The fact that he went to the summit, then the North Koreans kind of blew him off, so he left the summit in grandiose fashion. The fact that they're still developing new technology, the fact that nothing has really changed. They're not testing missiles anymore because they did the testing they wanted. And what they really want is the United States to lift sanctions and the United States So far won't. I think that's more to the credit of John Bolton than it is the credit of Donald Trump. But the very fact that Donald Trump has legitimized North Korea, the very fact that he has met with him, shaking his hand. Did you see the pictures of Donald Trump waving a communist flag, hugging the president of the genocidal leader, the barbaric leader of a communist country? I mean, give me a break. I mean, does nobody see this? This is the frustration coming out now. Don't you see how evil that is, how horrific that is? I mean, as bad as other presidents have been in sanctioning evil, there's no need for this. This is North Korea. Who the hell cares? So what happened? What happened just a couple of days ago, well, yesterday, is that the Treasury Department imposed big sanctions. Major sanctions on North Korea, new sanctions on North Korea. And within a few hours, Donald Trump tweeted that he is lifting those sanctions, that he is reversing the decision of the Treasury Department to increase sanctions on North Korea. So no, we don't need any more sanctions. They're fine. There's nothing wrong with them. And then when his spokesman was asked, Sanders, was asked about this, she said, look, Donald Trump likes the murderous, brutal dictator of North Korea. Not her words, of course. She named him by name. I refuse to name him by name. He doesn't deserve that. There's a good personal relationship there. So he doesn't think the sanctions are necessary. I mean, really? Really? I mean, this is so irrational, so sanction of evil, so horrific for a politician to do, that you don't negotiate with evil people. You don't negotiate with Hitler. You don't negotiate with Stalin. I know FDR did, and that was evil, and I would have called him on the evil. You don't negotiate with Mao Zedong. I think it was wrong of Nixon to go to China. And ultimately, a bad move, bad move. You cannot sanction the dictator's evil. You never should sanction the dictator's evil. Should we help South Korea take over North Korea? No. Why should we? I mean, North Korea is not, in my view, a threat to the United States of America. And the best way to deal with whatever threat North Korea poses to the United States of America is by knocking their missiles out of the air every time they shoot one up. A robust missile defense system. North Korea is a horrible place. It's a disastrous place. It's an evil place. But we don't need to send troops to die unless we believe that North Korea is an imminent threat, a real physical military threat to the United States of America. I don't think it is. But if it was, then we should just go in, invade, and crush them and destroy them and use nukes in the process in the right kind of way in order to destroy them so that they stop being a threat. But you have to do it smartly and you have to do it rightly. And you do not negotiate with them. All right. Do you think of Bibi Netanyahu? What do you think of Bibi Netanyahu as a leader? I think he's a terrible leader. I think he's incredibly corrupt, incredibly statist. I think he's weak on foreign policy, is weak in defending Israel, has been weak in doing the necessary things to eliminate the threat that Israel faces. And yet he positions himself as this tough guy, as a strong guy. He's lost a couple of wars. I think or at least one in the Gaza Strip with Hamas, and at least one in Lebanon with Hezbollah. He has not done what is necessary to defeat Hamas and defeat Hezbollah. He's just generally a weak and I think ultimately corrupt leader. So I'm not, and never have been, ever, a fan of Bibi Netanyahu's. Okay, these are going to be the last few questions, guys. It's getting late. All right. At this point with technology, can bad philosophy only slow us down and throw wretches in the process, but never actually stop the motor of the world? I mean, that's a good question. I guess that's possible. And it's certainly true, I think, in the very long run. But, and I made a similar case kind of in my rational optimism talk that you can find on my YouTube channel. Just put Yaron Brook Rational Optimism. It's a good talk, and I kind of talk about this. I think there's a sense in which it's not so much technology, but knowledge and the dispersion of knowledge across many countries, across many cultures. I think that dispersion of knowledge, engineering knowledge, scientific knowledge, is what is probably going to prevent the world from entering another dark ages, pretty much no matter what the philosophers want. But does that guarantee progress? And I think the answer is no. I think ultimately technology does not guarantee progress. I think ideas guarantee progress, and freedom is necessary for progress. And if the United States stops being free, and if other countries stop being free, then, it won't help that we have great technology. Technology will grind to a halt. I don't believe in super advanced technological societies that are authoritarian or totalitarian in nature. I don't think that is sustainable. I know you dislike royalty, but what are your thoughts on the role of Jean Carlos played in ending fascism in Spain? I mean, I think it's an example where royalty played a positive role, particularly given that he stepped back and not just allowed the ending of fascism in Spain, but allowed a republic to be formed in Spain and a democratic, semi-free government to be instituted in Spain. He didn't maintain his authoritarian position as king, even though there might have been some people in Spain who would have wanted it. So he played an important role in ending fascism and moving towards freer Spain, and that's good. I still hate and have no use for aristocrats and royalty. How bad is a Biden, Sanders, or Beto presidency? Well, I mean, it depends a lot on, for example, who wins the House and the Senate. Certainly, if the Democrats win the House, the Senate, and the presidency, a Bernie Sanders presidency in particular is an unmitigated disaster and could set this country back decades. Biden probably less so because he's more of a so-called moderate and would not let the kind of more nutty elements within the party completely take over. And I suspect that Beto is the same, that Beto, in spite of what he says and in spite of his posturing, is quite centrist. But all of them, any of them, with a Democratic House and a Democratic Senate, which they could have. I think there's a good chance the Senate flips to Democrats in 2020. There's a good chance that they maintain the House in 2020. All three of them, with a Democratic House and a Democratic Senate, could be a real disaster. It also depends on, do they have 2 years or do they have longer than that of House, Senate, and presidency? It depends on whether they have the Senate by 51-49 or they have the Senate by 44. So it depends on a lot of factors. But I didn't think Hillary Clinton was going to be the end of the world if she became president, because the Republicans had the House and the Senate, and I thought they could neutralize her worst policies and her worst ideas. I think ultimately, from a policy perspective, from an ideas perspective, any Democratic president in the future is going to be much worse than Hillary Clinton. I think thanks to Donald Trump, the Democratic Party has gotten even worse than it was, and it was already pretty bad. It's one of the long-term impacts that Donald Trump is going to have Donald Trump is going to have on the world. Is moving the Democratic Party even further to the left, and the Democratic electorate, not just the party, further to the left. So they're all going to be bad, but I don't think any one president destroys the presidency, left or right. I don't think Hillary would have, and indeed, I actually think maybe Hillary winning would not have been such a bad idea, because she probably would have lost this coming round, and maybe we would have had a Republican better than Trump, and we would have had to suffer 4 years of Hillary, but probably 4 years of Hillary with a Republican Senate and a Republican House, so she could have done nothing. So, I mean, the problem is they're all bad. They're all bad. And again, if Bernie Sanders was elected, but the Republicans held the House and the Senate, then I think it wouldn't be that bad, because he could do very little. Now, it's true that the idea of a Bernie Sanders being elected, the idea that those ideas having enough legitimacy to be elected is really scary. It's really scary. So, All right, let us let us make a day of it. So thank you all for joining me today. I really appreciate it. I know we covered a lot. We covered a lot of topics. Not everything I had on my list, but that's okay. We covered a lot of things you wanted to talk about, which is better. We'll do a show. My expectation is we'll do a show tomorrow as well, probably earlier in the day because I have to catch a flight. I'm flying to London tomorrow, so I'll probably have to catch a flight, so it'll be earlier in the day. But there will be a show tomorrow. So tomorrow, again, will be heavy on SuperChat. So prepare some questions. Think about what you would be willing to pay me to actually get an answer on. Oh, third generation punishment in North Korea. Well, Trump ignores all the evils of North Korea. Third generation, in North Korea, they punish the third generation. They punish everybody. You commit a crime, your grandchildren are punished. The evil of that regime is unspeakable. And yet, Donald Trump is best friends with the dictator of it. That really is everything you need to know about Donald Trump, in my view, is right there. If only we could find a courageous Republican who would run against Donald Trump in the primaries. If only. Hey, Ben Shapiro, where are you? That's your job. You're supposed to run against Donald Trump in the primaries. I'd vote for Ben. All right, everybody. Just quick reminders. Don't forget to support the show on Subscribestar, or even better, on my show, YaronBrookShow.com, on my website, YaronBrookShow.com/support, YaronBrookShow.com/support. Why don't I run for president? Two reasons, two big reasons. One, I was not born in the United States, and I do not have anybody to create a fake, I'm not going to even make that joke. And second, I would lose in a landslide. I couldn't even raise the money. I'd have to raise like $1 billion or something like that. Beto raised $6.4 million in one day, the day he announced. $6.4 million. I can't raise, $10,000 a month from you guys. So how am I going to run for president on $10,000 a month? So bring the big bucks and we'll talk. But, I'd lose in a landslide. Nobody would vote for me. I'm way too radical for most of you. Never mind for the electorate as a whole. All right. Please support the show. We'd really like to get to $10,000 a month. We're not that far from it, and we need your support to get there. That is, the more we do there, the less other stuff I have to do, the more I can concentrate on making the show the best show they can be and making these videos the best videos they can be. It's going to take a while to get there, so I encourage you all to contribute on the YaronBrookShow.com/support. On Subscribestar, of course, subscribe to my YouTube channel and to my podcast on Spreaker and on every podcasting app known to man. And I will see you all tomorrow, because who knows how many shows I'll be able to do from Europe. I'm hoping I'll do one from London, and I'm hoping I do one from Florence, Italy, one of my favorite places on planet Earth. Bye, guys. Talk to you tomorrow.